we're going to go through a quick Zoom, and the topic of today is going to be the benefit of multifamily versus other asset classes. I've got a couple things of the way we look at it, go through some things that we see, some things we're going to be attacking in the future. We'll keep it quick, like I said, probably about a half hour. I'll go through a couple of high-end topics, and any questions, by all means, you guys are welcome to ask. All right, so just start real high level, nice and easy. One family versus multifamily, something big that I noticed when I switched from going one or two family. Two family is very common from where I'm from. New York City's filled with basically all various kinds of multifamily, starting with two family. Two families are literally littered everywhere I am. And then after being in the two family world for a while, what I learned is it's almost impossible to get out of. No one wants to buy it when it's occupied. If it's occupied and you're interested in getting out of it, you literally, hold on, I'm going to turn off the waiting room here just so everyone could jump in. Okay. Once you're in a two-family house and you're in a place that isn't landlord friendly, they're worth significantly less. Once you occupy them, they're worth significantly less than if they were vacant. The way to sell a two-family house is at least to have one vacant, the best two. In a multifamilies are worth significantly more when they're leased. So the future of your fate when you own a two-family has a lot to do with the tenants that are in it. And if you're in a not landlord-friendly state, a tenant-friendly state, it makes it much worse. So scalability, multifamily is significantly more scalable than two-family. Once you at least 50 units, but once you start to hit 100 units, it becomes significantly easier. We've purchased 50-unit assets in the past. I could tell you the difference between managing a 50-unit and a 100-unit building is significantly different. 50 still being easier than anything smaller than it. For any of you that have 20 to 30 units, may God bless you. It's a very difficult place to be in. The hardest place I've ever been in this business is owning 20 to 30 units. That was the most difficult this business has ever been to me. It's because the assets can't afford to handle a professional management company, right? So could it put a staffer on to work part-time for you? Sure. Could it handle a leasing management office that has very small staff or does it on the side? Yes. But once you pass the 100-unit space and you get a professional management company, we like to look for institutional level property management. So basically, our property management companies have accountants on staff, project managers on staff. We have a full-time leasing agent at the property. We have on-staff maintenance. When we start to go even higher than 100, so we start scaling to 200 and 300, we have nighttime floaters, a nighttime maintenance person that's dedicated, and his salary gets split amongst the three assets. So now we have scalability in the market that really, really pushes to some operational efficiencies. So once you start to get more and more units, it gets significantly easier. The people who get stuck in the 30 units and say, this is plenty of work for me, I don't have much more space on my plate for any more units, really the answer is blow right past it and get more, and it becomes significantly easier. Another topic we were going to talk about was the difference between multi and other asset classes. If you look at the future and the uncertainty of what's going on, and now we have this AI, we have e-commerce is really, really taking off. Some of the other asset classes that we sometimes toy with, but we don't really get into, retail being one of them. Retail compared to multifamily is significantly more important. The location is significantly more important. So in multi, you could kind of play with the location, right? You don't want to be completely off the beaten path. But in retail, it's uber important to be in a good spot. And another thing with retail is it's definitely more difficult to break into a new market. Even in New York, I could tell you where almost every location would be considered fairly good. There's some real hotshot locations, but I could tell you some locations that most locations you could consider fairly good. Only the people who live here know that for some reason, whatever they put in that spot doesn't work. So when you're looking in other areas, multi is much easier to get into in other markets than retail. Retail, again, you have to really, really know the exact spot that you're looking for. Industrial, strong, but we see industrial right now is overpriced and everyone's looking at it, especially in the port towns. The port towns and close to real shipment hubs is where you want to get industrial. Industrial off the beaten path, that's still questionable. Amazon is going to prime locations. All the big hubs are going to prime spots. Once you get off the beaten path, industrial becomes a little bit weaker, but industrial you want to get into, it blew up recently. And usually when something blows up really quickly, it will hit a point that relaxes a little bit. So we see that going into industrial in the future, that industrial is extremely strong up until a few months ago. Everything kind of softened a little bit, but we don't think industrial is where it needs to be yet. And another thing with industrial is if you're just getting started or you're in your earlier part of your career, industrial is more, could be single tenant occupied. So you put yourself in a spot that if it's your only thing going, or you just have a couple of those, you're very low in your tenant count. So the big benefit to multifamily is you get a very broad spectrum of tenant count. So we say one of the most important things in multifamily, second to location, is unit count. So that was, when I learned that, that was kind of really took me to the next level, is knowing that the faster I could grow my unit count, the more stable of a portfolio I could have. When you have low unit count, so if you go into single tenant occupancies or triple net leases, you know, that's a really usually people who get into below single tenant occupancies have a tremendous amount of experience and a tremendous amount of money behind them. They can handle if someone leaves or if someone's going to leave or the unit to go vacant for a while. If you're in the period of your career where you wouldn't be able to handle such a large hit, and you know when you're ready for that hit, if you're unable to handle such a large hit, you want to stay away from single tenant anything, single tenant retail, single tenant industrial. You want to make sure that you keep the numbers high. The higher the numbers, the safer it is. If you have a two-family house and one person goes, it happens all the time, you lose one tenant in a two-family house, you're 50% unoccupied. I had someone ask me once, what happens if I don't want to do what you do? If I don't want to have as many units as you, or I don't want to be as risky as you? And my answer was, I would not want to be you. This specific guy had one two-family house as an investment. I would be scared shit to be someone who owns one two-family house, just because it typically means you don't have a tremendous amount of money behind you. And if you lose one tenant, you're going to be 50% occupied. There's a good chance that the other tenant can't support the house, which means you'll be taking money out of your pocket. Multifamily, easy to secure financing. I couldn't believe it, but the first multifamily asset I got under contract and closed, by the time we were closed, I realized that they never ran my credit. So in multifamily, and really the banks start to consider multifamily 6 units or better. But this really kicks into place 50 units or better, where the bank is heavily looking at the asset and lightly looking at you. So when you go get a loan on a large multifamily asset, what the bank is looking for is your net worth, your experience, and then the rest of the focus is on the asset. So when you get one of these loans, so say you get a $9-10 million loan, they want to make sure that your net worth is equivalent to the loan value. And a lot of people don't know that. So people think that they're looking at debt to income ratios, credit scores. They're really not looking at that. They're looking at your global financials. So they want to make sure that your net worth is worth at least the loan value. And they're looking for your track record. So they want to know that you've had an asset at least close to this size. So if you buy a 50 unit asset, the bank will let you buy a 75 unit asset. If you have a 75 unit asset, they'll let you buy 100. Once you buy 100, you could buy 150, 200. They know how it goes. They do this all the time. They know that once you have the experience to own and operate a 100-unit building, or one or two or three 100-unit buildings, basically the lid's off with experience. You could take down as much as your net worth would allow you to take down. So there is little to no flexibility on that net worth requirement. You'll see a lot of times people, when they get into multifamily, they bring in someone who's able to satisfy the experience and someone who's able to satisfy the net worth requirement. So a lot of times in multifamily partnerships, and we really don't operate this way, but there's a couple of guys on the GP team, and usually everyone has a job. So one person will have a job that they bring the net worth. They don't want to do anything. They just want to sign on the loan. Another person will bring experience. Another person will bring the ability to raise equity. So really, that's the three things you need to take down a multifamily deal. That's actually one of the cons of buying multifamily, is there is really no entry level. If you get into multifamily and you want to get into an entry level, usually what you're doing is you're not buying enough units, and you're just you're tying yourself up in such a tremendous amount of work. If you tie up a 30 unit, 20 unit deal, you're basically going to be managing that thing yourself. There's not going to be much space or room to hire a staff to manage it. And something you'll see when you go to buy these assets, there's going to be underwriting that's handed to you, right? So the broker's going to hand you some underwriting, and they're going to say, this is what your underwriting should look like. So underwriting is the Excel sheets that we put together financials on a property. When they hand you this underwriting, it's going to be lacking an important line, management. And that's because you're going to see that a lot of your competition in multifamily, you have to realize who your competition is. If they're lacking the management line, there's a good chance that there's a lot of other people who are looking at this asset saying, I could handle getting 20 to 30 phone calls a week from 20 to 30 tenants. So if you're getting into that world, you're going to be competing against other people that are in the same light as that. So, or they think the same way. So if you're planning on bringing in a management company and the asset doesn't really require a management company, or other people are bidding on it that will be doing it themselves, you'll never be able to pay the price fair enough to get you into the spot to win the deal. If you do, you'll be overpaying for your standards. So once you get into the 100-unit world, absolutely 100% of the people who are buying that asset have management baked in. So it becomes more of a level playing field. Another con of multifamily is the competition. The competition is fierce in multifamily. When we're looking at an asset, it's very, very rare that we're able to pull the shirt over the seller's heads at all. Meaning finding a void, finding something that we could tweak. It's very common that other buyers, and it doesn't have to be the seller or the broker who's selling the deal. A lot of times the other buyers are doing all the work. And that's why a lot of times brokers, they'll actually do, brokers will do no price. So the multifamily for quite a while now, at least the past couple of years, has been brought on the market with no price attached, which is very interesting, because really what the brokers are doing is they're putting out some paperwork and they're letting the buyers figure the rest out. And once you hit 100, you're in a pool of very sophisticated individuals. So unless you just happen to be in the right place at the right time, or you find an asset through a relationship and it doesn't have a whole bunch of people looking at it, that's really the only time in multifamily where you could get like a score. I can tell you the assets that we've purchased we've purchased that were on market assets. We have only gotten through a tremendous amount of persistence, endless amounts of LOIs, endless amounts of offers, endless amounts of conversations with brokers, just keep beating it up until we finally get a deal under contract. The deals that we've gotten more simpler and say better deals were through relationships that we formed from doing on-market deals. So whenever you hear off-market deal, for some reason, the human brain like loves the sound of an off-market deal. They think it's extremely exclusive, that they were blessed with the ability to be placed on a list, or they got a phone call from an off-market deal. But I could tell you that almost 100% of the time, when we get the phone call that we have an off-market deal headed our way, what it is it's sometimes the brokers will refer to it as a pocket listing, but this is what it winds up being. Say I'm the seller of a multifamily asset, and I'm like, we could sell it, or maybe we won't sell it. But if we get this number, we'll sell it. We'll call our favorite broker, or the broker who put us in touch with the deal, or the broker who sold us the deal, whatever broker we're using, or a broker that's reaching out to us a million times saying, hey, I'll sell it for you, I'll sell it for you, I'll sell it for you. He comes to us and says, Chris, Lakeshore Grand, what do you want for it? Like, I don't know. I really don't want to sell it. They're like, no, what if we get a number for you, what do you want for it? Like, 12 million bucks. Okay. If we get you 12 million, you'll sell it? Yeah. All right, great. Send us the details, send us some financials. We'll try to grab you 12 million bucks. I'm like, yeah, sure. Send it all over. They put together a small little marketing email, and now that's an off-market deal. So now they're sending it to all these people looking for off-market deals. And really what it is it's some seller somewhere who's just looking for some really big number. And if they strike, sure, we'll sell. But we're not looking to go through the whole marketing process that it takes to sell a multifamily. In my opinion, if someone's a seller, if they're looking to sell a multifamily or looking to sell anything, why would we do an off-market deal? We're blasting it. The only time we've seen someone go after, these deals actually still never worked out, but what we're seeing now is the only time a deal would be a seller, meaning a market seller, like he's ready to go, but he doesn't market the property, go through the whole marketing procedure, is a fund who doesn't want to immediately let his investors know that he's selling. And the reason for that is some people right now are going to be stuck in floating rate debt. So they got into an asset 1 or 2 years ago. They were like, rates are going to stay low forever. If people got into these situations where they thought rates would stay low forever, and they were very confident in the market, and rates have crept up and their rate lock is expiring. Some people actually don't even have rate locks. They're in trouble and they want to sell without letting everyone know that they're selling. So basically what they could do is they could do an off market, try to get it locked up quick, notify their investors, hey, we got an offer on this property. We think it's a great time to exit. We're going to break even, but we have another asset to throw you right into. So that would be the only other time that you would see an off market deal pencil. But for us, those have never came true, because I think what wound up happening is those sellers, they were just trying to test the waters and they weren't real sellers. But for the most part, that's what off-market deals are. And the only other con is a lot of people, I think that owning a multifamily, although is easier than say a 30 unit, so a 100 to 500 unit portfolio is easier to manage than a 30 unit. A big difference is, one of the other parts that you have to realize is it does become more of a full-time job. But the reason that it's okay is it does start to pay you to do that. So if you're looking to manage a couple hundred units and do nothing, you're going to be a big failure. So you have to make sure that if you want to take this journey on, that this is not a part-time job for you. It becomes more of a full-time job. But the good part is that it's actually available and ready, and it's able to pay everyone that it needs to pay. So it's able to pay the management company. It's able to pay you as a general partner, an asset manager. An asset manager is one layer above a property manager. So property manager, they're talking to the tenants, they're doing the day-to-day, they're doing all the repairs, managing the construction. And us as asset managers, we just got a phone call, ended at 5 o'clock. We went from 4:30 to 5. We have a weekly asset manager call with our property manager. And it's basically, let's just talk about the hot topics that are going on at the property. What's going on? How's vacancy? How's occupancy? Any concerning things that are going on? Any troublesome tenants? How are we doing with leases? Should we push up the advertising or lower it? So the calls are fairly in depth and very necessary. You just have to be prepared for all that. And let's hit some topics that we see in the market now. I could tell you that multifamily world or real estate in the asset classes that we're looking at, there is nothing for sale. There's nothing going on in the market at all. If you pull up Crexy or LoopNet is terrible. Let me hit on LoopNet for 1 second. So LoopNet, in case you don't know, I'll just go through the marketing procedure, how multifamily typically works. Broker gets a deal. He throws it out to his boys who he knows are able to close. The biggest thing for these multifamily brokers is lining the sellers up with people who they know could close. Being that there's so much money involved, and the close rate is actually not as strong as regular residential real estate. Like if you go into a contract on a 1 or 2 family house, they close for the most part. It's very rare that they don't close. Sure, issues pop up once in a while, and we've had, when we were selling 1 or 2 family houses, we had contracts cancel occasionally, but for the most part, they close. Commercial real estate, on the other hand, is so much more that could go wrong, because usually a group of people are putting this together and something has to go wrong in one way or another. And the brokers or the sellers, they're not concerned about keeping your deposit. That's not like their goal. Their goal is to close the deal. So brokers, the first thing they go to is they go to the people that they've done business with and they know are able to close. So they get the first call. Then the broker does an email it's on a little bit larger of a list. So if you subscribe to Cushman & Wakefield, CBRE, if you subscribe to these email lists, that's the next place it goes. From there, if it sits there a little bit or targets aren't being hit where they want to hit, that then goes to Crexy or a similar site, but Crexy is definitely one of the more popular ones. If it goes to Crexy and they still don't get anything and their sellers being very stubborn, it then goes to LoopNet. So when you see something go to LoopNet, it passed through numerous channels before it finally sat down and sat on LoopNet, and there it literally goes to die. And are some deals had on LoopNet? Do people close deals on LoopNet? Sure, but I could tell you that a lot of eyes saw that deal prior to it getting there. And the reason that's important is, in real estate, if it was easy to get into, it's going to be very hard to get out of. That's a line I learned a long time ago, and it's proven to be true. If you think that you're running into this thing, a heavily marketed deal, if you think you're running into it, and there are exceptions, of course, but if you run into a heavily marketed deal, and you're one of the only people who found value in that deal, it's very rare that winds up being a good deal. And there's a good chance that the way you get into it is going to be the way that you get out of it. Endless marketing, and eventually you'll find someone who missed something and bought the deal. So, when you're getting into deals and you see that it's been marketed for a serious amount of time, the only time that makes sense, and it even happens in the multifamily, listen, people get tired. Someone could want, I want a 5 cap for this. I want $10 million for this. And then eventually they're like, screw it, just get rid of this thing. If you happen to hit that moment at the right time, that's when you could hit that deal. But for the most part, when something gets to LoopNet, it's usually weak. Sometimes we'll hit LoopNet and just scan around to see what's going on. But how'd I get into this? I got into it by letting you know that if you go on, and I don't search LoopNet enough to know, but I could tell you even as far as Crexy, Search Crexy units over my search parameters. Typically, I start with 90 because I like to buy 100 units and over, but would I buy a 96 unit? Sure. There seems to be a lot of 96 unit, 99 unit. Probably at the time it was a zoning regulation or they didn't have the acreage to fit that extra unit. But there are a lot of apartment facilities in the 90s. I don't want to cross that off. I don't like to go below 90. So I'll start my search at 90 plus. And literally what it is it's no deals. And there's the occasional deal that I remember from like a year and a half ago. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that deal's still for sale. So probably by a fault of my own, I should be reaching out to those brokers saying, hey, does this guy have any flexibility yet? To see if I could get that steal, like the guy who's just tired and wants to get out. But usually in multifamily, because these things are cash producing, so it goes back to another pro, right? Multifamily is a cash, usually if you leverage it right. So if you don't get into a bad loan, multifamily is a cash producing asset that will just continue to flow cash basically forever. So as long as you're managing it right and you're keeping people in it, it will just produce cash for as long as it's alive. So if it hits a time like right now where it's not the most favorable time to sell, you just leave it and let it sit. So a lot of times the deals that have been on the market for such a long period of time, they're not sellers anyway. They're not interested in selling the asset. They're just saying, we'll let it sit. And again, if we get our number, great. If not, who cares? And that's why the multifamily market, real estate market, unless an asset's seeing some level of distress, people are like, my thing's cash flowing right now. Why am I going to sell? I'm going to stay back. And we're reading. I'll hit two quick topics. We'll go to questions and then we could cut it. I know you guys' time is valuable. We're reading and we follow up John Burns reports. We're constantly reading articles put out from the institutions, and we try to get as high level as we can with the articles. And what we're seeing is, and what we're reading is the distress in the market is not coming on like they said it would. And the reason that's interesting, and I actually said this a while ago when they were talking about all this level of distress that's going to come. So I remember I went to an event, they put on a screen, this is all the deals that loans are expiring in 2022, 2023. So they make it seem like, say Phoenix, Arizona, there's 200 high balance loans expiring. There's going to be 200 assets for sale. No, because it doesn't mean that all of those loans are bad. And you have to remember that people who got into this business buying assets north of 10 million bucks are people that got into these assets people that got into this business buying assets north of 10 million. They're typically not a group of people who give up. So there's not going to be very many people who just throw the towel in and say, screw it, let this thing go back. Because a lot of these assets are owned by a group who has investors behind him. So for someone just to say, you know what, screw it, let this thing die, that's a very, very poor operator, and typically might be brand new in the business and basically came in business and went right back out of business. But it's very rare that someone who is in business and has a good track record and is really looking to carry this business through isn't figuring out a way to keep that asset under their control. Because really, all we have to do right now is weather a small storm. The market is starting to turn. We were just in Las Vegas. So we balanced that trip to be two different shows. During the day, we were at the Builders Convention. At the end of the day, we went to NMHC, which is at ARIA. And we were hearing the same story over and over and over again. Interest is picking back up. They call it dry powder. That's equity sitting in people's pockets. That means there's money sitting on the sidelines for the right opportunity. So all of this exists. Equity is not dried up. There is not a outlook in the future for this asset class to crash as much as everyone was waiting for it. And I think you'll still continue to hear that There could be a crash coming or pain is coming. You hear all these things, but my belief is some people will fall out, most will figure it out, and everyone will recover just fine. And an asset class that we're putting a tremendous amount of attention on, I do not mind sharing my secrets. We're putting a tremendous amount of focus right this second on the build to rent model. So the build to rent model is one of two things. It's a home builder who built 100+ houses, and we'll actually look 75+ in this realm. 75+ houses with the intention of selling them all. There is a possibility, that he's slightly nervous about the sales of these houses. And home sales have slowed down, obviously, because of interest rates. Or B, he's in a position where his loan is costing him significantly more, and he had the quicker he could exit, the better. So it's either someone who's nervous or someone who's in a bad spot. So construction loans are usually floating. Those guys could be in a bad spot because actually, if it's the two guys combined, nervous and his loans expiring or climbing rapidly, sometimes guys will open up a spreadsheet to look at each other and say, you know what? If we wait to get what we thought we were going to get with the retail prices with for these houses, if we sell them this much cheaper, what we'll do is we'll lower our interest expense on our construction loan X amount, and it would make sense for us to exit quicker, and there's no risk. So basically what we would do is we're going to market to these home builders. So either the project is finished, it's just about finished, or it just started. The guys who just started would be the most attractive to us. And we're marketing to these guys saying, hey, if you guys want, we'll go into contract for all the houses right now. We'll buy them all from you. So now a guy who feels like he might have he might have some exposure to market risk, or he may not be able to close the houses as quickly as he would have liked, or just has concern of the future, he's willing to sign a contract for 75, 100, 125 houses in one shot, and we would be the buyer for those. Another thing that we're looking at is builders who are willing to build, have access to land, and they're willing to just get a general contractor's job. So there's plenty of people out there who have the ability, wherewithal, and they would love to build 7,500, 125 houses in one shot, but they don't have the capital behind them to do so. We're willing to come in, provide the capital, and get these assets going and get them under construction. We're really looking at it. We're spending time on LinkedIn. We're contacting builders. I was probably on CoStar for 5 or 6 hours last night. I'm not even sure who won the Super Bowl. I didn't turn it on once. And I spent all my time on CoStar. I have a list here of about 30 builders who will be calling over the next couple of days to see what their intentions are over the next 6 months to a year. And it kind of steers around our need to learn markets and zoning in other areas, because these builders will do it for us. If we call a builder and say, hey, we're looking to build 100 houses, a guy in a local market will say, oh yeah, sure, there's a lot down the road. It just came up for sale. We looked at it. We don't have the capital to do it. We have the ability to do it. So we don't have 30 or 40 million bucks to tie up to get this thing going, but we do have the ability to get it done. It almost reminds me of when I got into business. I started custom home building before spec home building, because custom home building, I had the ability to build a house, but I didn't have the money to build a house. So my client pays for their house as it's under construction. So we were able to build houses without laying out the money. It's the same thing with these guys. They have the ability to drop 100 houses on a plot of land, but they don't have the money to do so. So we could be, and that could be a perfect marriage. So it skips us having to learn zoning in certain markets. And then remember land. I'm not going to get into land now, but land has a much longer due diligence time than multifamily does. Multifamily cuts you off 15, 30 days max. They don't want you past that. Land could be a couple months due diligence. So we have time to verify everything the builder's saying. But that's what we're looking for into the future. That's what we have going on. I'd like to know what any of you have going on, or any questions or anything you want to hit on. we could shoot through it. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, raise your hand and we'll answer it. If not, we could get back to our nights. I'm in no rush to hang up, but whatever you guys want. All right. All right, guys. Well, thanks for jumping on. And you could throw a question in the chat too if you want. Heather, thanks. Good seeing you. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, that was good information.
Oh, thanks, Ange.
Yeah.
How's Las Vegas? Is it is the house market building?
They're
still flying off the shelves.
No, they totally have slowed down, and the new builds are offering major discounts, and yeah, it's definitely softened.
Yeah, so those are our guys. Those are
Yeah.
our guys. The guys that are seeing discounts, they're ready to get out. They want their capital back. Remember, another thing with builders is they're extremely interested in recapitalizing. So if I build a house and it cost me in New York, it cost me $600,000 or $700,000 to put a house together, and the market, what I think, crashes, right? A builder, if I get that money back, $600,000 or $700,000, I have no problem saying, all right, yeah, whatever. I did a bunch of work. I worked for free. I got my money back. Let's go play. Because now we know that we could get into something much cheaper and we'll make more money on the next one. Because if you buy at the bottom, not to say this is the bottom, time will only tell, but builders always interested in recapitalizing. So at a minimum, recapitalizing. So as the builders get squeezed, as the real estate market gets squeezed, the builders are the first to flex because they have no option but to sell. Homeowners could wait. They're like, nah, we're not getting anything for this. Let's just continue to live here. So, right, if you own a house and the market and the value plummets, some people get emotionally hurt, but it really doesn't matter. If you live in $1 million house and the market tanks and it's down to 700,000, so you take a 30% haircut, which is tremendous. 20% haircut, it's worth 800,000. Does it really matter if you're not looking to move? So builders have to sell. So that's going to be our target. And, builders who are interested in recapitalizing or not making as much as they would have liked, which builders are also okay with. They're the first to cut their prices and we'll pick them up. And we know in due time that the houses will be worth more. And we know, we kind of get the inside scoop that the BTR, build to rent, is becoming an institutionalized asset class. So over 100 units in the near term will be considered an institutional level investment. So that means that there's a great chance that when we buy these assets in due time, they will be selling for a high 4 cap, low 5 cap. We'll eliminate the housing. We're basically removing the entire housing market from our portfolio, or the risk of the housing market from our portfolio. So if we sign a contract with a builder to buy his houses at $250,000, $300,000 a house, someone says, well, what happened? Builder goes into it. He's like, oh, man, hopefully the housing market doesn't crash. To us, we're like, whatever. We know that we underwrote our deal at a certain rent, which we all know that rents will creep down a little bit, but they're not going to go straight down. We lock in with the rent. We just ride out the storm. We lease our units, and we're not in a position where we have to sell. So in real estate, when you put yourself in a position where you have no option but to sell, that's the most vulnerable place you could be. That's why I quickly got into flipping houses when I was younger, and I quickly got out. The TV shows make it seem glamorous. Everyone's getting rich. They're not. It's a shit place to be in real estate. So let's see, in the chat, I see, if interest rates remain elevated into 2024, what do I see the housing environment to be like? If they stay where they are now, I think the housing market will soften slightly, I don't see a major collapse coming in the housing market, mainly because the supply is so limited. There are, the United States as a whole is millions undersupplied on houses. I don't see the housing market collapsing. I see it softening slightly. And inevitably, most of the country, if they've gotten a loan in the past couple of years, are all locked up for 30 years or 15 years in long-term debt at great interest rates. So what you're going to see is people don't have to move. If you look at a piece of paper and you're like, okay, we sell this house and then we have to get a new loan at a new house. Even if we sell our house for $800,000, we get into a new $800,000 house, which usually people are selling an 800 to get into $1 million or selling an 800 to get into 1.2 million. Like, all right, it was going to be that we were going to pay an extra 400 a month, but now we're paying an extra $2,000 a month. You know what? Screw it. Just sit. So we're going to see that the housing market, the reason prices are going to hold is just because there's going to be so many less people who want to sell. And the people who absolutely need to buy a house are going to wind up paying more, paying up for it. So the reason that you saw in 2008 a major plummet in the market, not to get into 2008, but a major plummet in the market, there's a tremendous amount of loans out there that were floating rate and people had no skin in the game. Now people have skin in the game. The loans are locked for a long period of time at a real low interest rate. So there's just going to be people who sit still, and the renovation business actually should kick up significantly. So if you guys are looking for a new business to get into, start renovating. I've done it. It's probably best to stay away from it. Actually, it's not the best business. So yeah, that's how I feel. I know we just got into the housing market and how I feel about it, but yeah, it's a great way to look at it. And remember, another thing, and Ange and I were actually at the same meeting, Grant Cardone. We were at a Grant Cardone event. He brought up a great point. Airbnb will save the housing market. And the reason is, if you own a house, you can't sell it, but you're locked into an extremely cheap mortgage. You're just going to wind up leasing it instead. You know, only really desperate people in bad situations are going to sell a house for a haircut right now, if you really, really have to get out. But even if you want to move or do something else with your life, and you're like, man, we can't sell this thing, the other option is to lease it and make money, because the rents are up and you're locked into a super low rate, super low mortgage rate. Yeah. All right, guys, anything else? Frank, thanks for joining, buddy. Frank is major real estate also. He does a lot of local stuff. He does, he works in another asset class. Frankie, if you're there, if you want to chime in, if not, we'll get you next time. All right, bud. All right, all. Thanks for joining in. Again, we'll do this weekly, and we'll shoot around real estate, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Any questions, we're all in. And that's it.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, Ange. Yeah. See you guys later. Take care.
Take care.